Leavenworth, Kansas, September 1944. Sergeant Erica Veber stood by the barrack window of the women's prisoner of war camp.
Her gaze fixed on the training grounds beyond the fence.
To her discerning eye, what unfolded was an almost farcical display of military disarray. American soldiers engaged in training exercises with an informality and apparent lack of precision that sharply contrasted with the rigorous exactitude honed during their own service in the German Wehrmacht. "Look at them," she remarked to Corporal Monica Brown, gesturing towards the American troops conducting field maneuvers. "There's no synchronized movement, no parade ground. Precision. They look more like farmers playing at soldiers." Monica joined her at the window, surveying the scene with a critical gaze refined by her 8 years in German signal intelligence. "Their formation discipline is appalling," she concurred. "Such sloppiness would have been met with immediate punishment in the Wehrmacht." The 42 German female prisoners of war at Fort Leavenworth represented a spectrum of military specialties, including communications officers, medical personnel, and administrative staff, all captured during the intense fighting of the Normandy campaign. Most, like Erica, were deeply instilled with the belief in the Wehrmacht's inherent superiority and the perceived military inferiority of Allied forces. Any American success was invariably attributed to industrial might, rather than genuine military prowess. "The Americans win by sheer numbers and resources," Erica continued, reflecting the pervasive propaganda she had internalized throughout her service. "Not by superior soldiers or training. Just observe their movements. No discipline. German soldiers would execute the same drills with precise uniformity. Through the perimeter fence, they watched as American infantry practiced squad tactics within a wooded training area. The soldiers operated independently rather than in synchronized formations, communicating through hand signals and making individual decisions based on terrain and tactical in Eric's Wehrmacht-trained estimation. This appeared both chaotic and inefficient. Sergeant Anderson's voice cut through the barrack doorway. Erica Veber, the respectful appellation, notably used by American guards, even for enemy combatants, always struck Erica. "Colonel Morrison requests your presence at the administration building. He wishes to discuss the prisoner of war work detail program." As Erica traversed the camp toward the meeting point, she inadvertently overheard an American instructor guiding soldiers through a combat scenario. The training emphasized initiative, problem-solving, and adaptability, rather than the rote memorization and synchronized movements she believed were characteristic of proper military discipline. "Inferior training methods," she muttered to herself. "No wonder they require such overwhelming material superiority to defeat." U.S. Colonel Morrison's office overlooked the main training facilities, and through his window, Erica could observe several ongoing exercises. Physical conditioning, weapons practice, tactical simulations, all conducted with that seemingly unprofessional, unceremonious efficiency that so unsettled her Wehrmacht-trained sensibilities. Fräulein Bever began once she was seated. "We are implementing a new program that allows high-performing prisoners of war to observe American military training. The objective is cultural education, to demonstrate that our methods, while different from the German approach, are effective in their own right. You wish for us to observe your training." Erica struggled to conceal her skepticism. To observe American soldiers who lacked the discipline and precision that defined true military excellence. Morrison's expression remained neutral, though something in his gaze suggested he had encountered similar sentiments before. "I ask that you observe with an open mind, and draw your own conclusions based on evidence, not preconception. You might be surprised by what you learn." The proposition struck Erica as audacious enemy. Prisoners of war, offering commentary on their captors' training method. Yet, her intelligence background cultivated a certain intellectual curiosity regarding the American military structure. Even as she remained convinced, she already knew the inevitable conclusions. German training produced superior soldiers. American success stemmed from industrial capacity, not military prowess. "I will observe," she conceded, "though I anticipate my conclusions will confirm my existing views on the comparison of military aptitudes." Morrison offered a slight smile. "Then you have nothing to lose, save careful observation. Training observation begins tomorrow morning at 0600 hours." Upon returning to the barracks, Erica shared the news of the training observation program with the other prisoners. Their reactions ranged from intrigued curiosity to outright derision, yet all, like her, remained firmly convinced that German military training represented the pinnacle of military excellence, and that American methods were merely an inferior substitute made possible by industrial abundance. Tomorrow, she would meticulously document the perceived shortcomings of American training in her intelligence reports maintained even in captivity, never doubting that what she witnessed would challenge her fundamental assumptions about military effectiveness, training philosophy, and the relationship between discipline and combat success. As the pre-dawn darkness began to yield to the first light of day, Sergeant Anderson escorted Erica and 5 other German prisoners of war to an observation area overlooking the main training facilities at Fort Leavenworth. They were provided with notebooks and instructed to record any American military methods they found. Noteworthy a request that Erica perceived as either supremely confident or utterly naive. "The unit you will observe today is completing advanced infantry training," Anderson explained in his careful German. "These soldiers will deploy to the Pacific Theater in 6 weeks. Observe carefully and ask questions if you do not understand what you see." At daybreak, the American soldiers assembled with an efficiency that surprised Erica. It was not the rigid parade ground precision she expected of a military formation, but a purposeful organization that suggested the soldiers understood their roles without continuous supervision. "Do you notice anything unusual?" asked Captain Williams, the training oversight officer, who had joined their observation group. "They are not standing at attention," Erica observed. "The Wehrmacht soldiers maintain a rigid posture in formation. Yours appear casual." "They are relaxed," Williams corrected gently. "We do not expend energy on parade ground courtesies when training in the field. These soldiers know why they are here and what is expected of them. We do not need to enforce discipline through rigid posture. We instill it through their understanding of purpose." This distinction struck Erica as merely semantic, but she dutifully recorded the American approach to formation discipline. The true surprises began when the training exercises commenced. The first drill involved a squad's tactical movement through varied terrain. Instead of moving in synchronized formation, American soldiers advanced independently, each adjusting their movements to terrain features and cover positions while maintaining overall squad cohesion. To Erica, it appeared disorganized, yet she noted the squad covered ground rapidly while maintaining mutual support. "Why do they not move together?" Monica inquired, voicing the question that troubled all the German observers. "In Wehrmacht training, squad members advance in coordinated formations." "Because terrain is never uniform," Williams replied. "Rigid, formal movement may look impressive on the parade ground, but it is tactically inefficient in actual combat. We train soldiers to think independently while maintaining squad integrity. Each individual assesses their position and actions based on the tactical situation." Over the next hour, Erica's observations of American training systematically challenged her ingrained notions of proper military discipline. Soldiers were encouraged to question orders that seemed tactically unsound. Junior enlisted personnel made independent decisions in simulated combat. The training emphasized problem-solving over rigid obedience. "This would never work in the Wehrmacht," she told Williams during a break. "German military excellence comes from perfect obedience to command, synchronized execution, and acceptance of command authority." "And how has that worked out?" Williams asked softly, gesturing towards the German prisoners of war observing the American training. "Your army prioritized obedience over initiative. Our army prioritizes mission accomplishment over rigid procedure. You are here as prisoners. Our soldiers are preparing for their next deployment. The results speak for themselves regarding comparative training effectiveness." The observation stung Erica, an uncomfortable truth she was reluctant to acknowledge. She had been captured precisely because her Wehrmacht unit had continued to execute outdated orders despite changing tactical situations. The rigid obedience she championed had directly contributed to her unit's destruction and capture. "Tomorrow," Williams continued, "you will observe advanced tactical training, where soldiers plan and execute complex operations with minimal officer supervision. I think you will find it enlightening." As they returned to the prisoner of war camp, unsettling questions churned within Erica's mind. American training appeared casual, undisciplined, yet it evidently produced soldiers capable of complex, independent action. Wehrmacht training emphasized synchronized, precision, and absolute obedience. Yet it had led to Germany's defeat. Had she been fundamentally mistaken about what constituted superior military training? The possibility felt treasonous, yet the accumulating evidence, sifted through her intelligence background, became undeniable. The second day of training observations brought advanced tactical exercises, where American soldiers planned and executed simulated combat operations. With a degree of independence unimaginable within the rigid Wehrmacht system, Erica observed an 8-man squad, with no officer present, analyze a tactical problem, formulate a solution, and implement it with coordinated efficiency that bore no resemblance to German synchronized movement, yet effectively achieve the mission objective. "Where are the officers?" asked Lieutenant Bergman, a former Luftwaffe communications officer who had joined the observation group. "Who is commanding this operation?" "Sergeant Hayes is the squad leader," Captain Williams responded, indicating an experienced non-commissioned officer who was consulting with his team rather than issuing directives. In the American military system, non-commissioned officers lead small unit operations. Officers provide strategic guidance, but we trust NCOs to handle tactical execution. "You permit soldiers to make command decisions?" Erica's voice dripped with incredulity. Such autonomy would have been utterly anathema in the Wehrmacht, where the officer corps maintained strict hierarchical control, and soldiers executed orders without question or independent initiative. "We don't just permit them. We require it," Williams corrected. "Combat is chaotic. Communications break down. Officers get killed or wounded. Situations change faster than orders can be transmitted. We train every soldier to think independently and make tactical decisions. That way, even if the chain of command breaks down, our forces remain effective." As the exercise progressed, Erica understood Williams' point. The American squad encountered an unexpected obstacle, enemy position in an unanticipated location, and immediately adjusted its plan without waiting for higher directives. Squad members communicated efficiently, repositioned, and executed modified tactics, neutralizing the threat. Total time from problem identification to resolution: 4 minutes, Erica reluctantly conceded. In Wehrmacht training, encountering unexpected situations would require requesting new orders from higher command. We would report the change in situation and await instruction. "And how long would that take?" Williams inquired. 15 to 30 minutes, depending on communication, efficiency, and command availability. And in combat, that's often too long. By the time new orders arrive, the situation has changed again. Williams gestured to the American squad consolidating its position after completing the exercise. "We train soldiers to solve problems in real time because that is what combat demands. Your Wehrmacht training produced excellent obedience. Our training produced effective problem solving." Over the next week, the training system Erica and the other German posts observed systematically dismantled their fundamental assumptions about military excellence. Physical training emphasized functional strength and endurance, not parade ground bearing. American soldiers, though appearing less formally pristine than their Wehrmacht counterparts on the parade ground, demonstrated superior stamina and sustained operations. Weapons training taught soldiers to understand mechanical principles, not just rote operational procedures. This meant American soldiers could maintain and repair equipment in field conditions, whereas Wehrmacht soldiers would require specialist support. Leadership training at all levels emphasized initiative and problem solving. Even common soldiers received instruction in small unit tactics, as American military doctrine operated on the premise that every soldier might, at some point, be required to lead. "It's an entirely different philosophy," Monica observed during an evening discussion. Wehrmacht training assumes the soldier is a component in a machine, a precision part operating in perfect sync. American training assumes the soldier is an independent operator, coordinating actions toward a common objective. And which philosophy produced better combat results? Bergman quietly asked. Everyone knew the answer, but no one wanted to speak it aloud. Erica had been meticulously documenting American training methods, initially intending to meticulously record their perceived deficiencies for future intelligence purposes. However, as the evidence mounted, her notes increasingly served to compare American and German approaches, systematically questioning the bedrock assumptions of her military career. "Captain Williams, She approached him after a particularly illuminating training session. "May I ask you a personal question?" "Of course. Is your training specifically designed to counter German methods? Or did these methods evolve independently?" Williams considered the question. "American military training evolved organically from our distinct national character and cumulative combat experience. As a nation founded on individual initiative and democratic principles, our military inherently reflects these values. We empower soldiers to think independently, because that is how Americans intuitively approach. It happens to be effective against armies built on rigid hierarchy and absolute obedience. But that is almost coincidental. So you are saying American military effectiveness stems from cultural values, not deliberate tactical design. I am saying our training is effective because it is true to the nature of our society itself. You cannot simply import another nation's military methodology without also importing the cultural values that make it effective. Wehrmacht training produces perfect obedience because German culture values hierarchy and authority. American training produces initiative and problem-solving because these are traits our citizens admire. This explanation profoundly disturbed Erica's observations. She had always assumed American training was merely an inferior version of the German method. But Williams was implying they were fundamentally different approaches, based on different values, and that American values might cultivate more adaptable soldiers. 2 weeks into the training observation program, Colonel Morrison invited Erica to attend an officer development course where the command philosophy taught to American lieutenants and captains seemed designed to refute everything she had learned at the Wehrmacht's Officer Academy. Major Patterson, during a leadership seminar, Erica was permitted to audit, articulated a revolutionary concept. The primary duty of an American officer is to cultivate subordinates capable of operating autonomously. Your success as a leader is measured not by the flawless execution of your orders, but by how effectively your soldiers accomplish the mission in your absence. This concept was revolutionary. To Erica, in Wehrmacht officer training, success meant maintaining absolute control and ensuring the perfect execution of orders. The idea that an officer should deliberately foster subordinate independence struck her as an abdication of command responsibility. "What if a soldier disagrees with an order?" Erica asked during the question period, taking advantage of Morrison's permission for her to participate in discussions. "It depends on the situation," Patterson replied. "In combat, orders must be executed immediately and can be discussed afterward if time permits. During planning and training, we encourage soldiers to question orders they don't understand or believe are flawed. Some of our best tactical innovations have come from enlisted men or junior officers who saw a better way than what senior command initially envisioned." "But that erodes command authority," Erica protested. "Military effectiveness requires hierarchical discipline and unquestioning obedience." "Does it?" Patterson asked, gently. "You are a captured Wehrmacht officer, Fräulein Weber. Your army emphasized hierarchical discipline and unquestioning obedience. How well did that serve Germany's military effectiveness?" The question was sharp, but not hostile, delivered with a directness Americans seemed to prefer over diplomatic circumlocution. Erica had no good answer, for the evidence was overwhelming. German military training had produced impeccably obedient soldiers who, executing flawed orders with perfect precision, inadvertently contributed to strategic disasters that individual initiative might have averted. "I have been reflecting on your observations," Morrison told her after the seminar. "You have been meticulously documenting American training methods. Would you be willing to share your analysis? Not for intelligence, per pussy. The war is effectively over, and this information is hardly classified, but I am curious to hear a officer's perspective on our military training methodology." Erica hesitated, then agreed. Over the next week, she compiled her observations into a comprehensive report comparing American and Wehrmacht training philosophies. The process forced her to articulate conclusions she had previously avoided. American training produced soldiers adaptable to unexpected situations. Wehrmacht training produced soldiers capable of perfectly executing known procedures, but who struggled when situations deviated from the plan. The American command structure broadly diffused decision-making authority, whereas the Wehrmacht structure concentrated it at higher echelons, inevitably creating bottlenecks when rapid decisions were imperative. American military culture valued mission accomplishment over procedural correctness. Wehrmacht culture valued procedural correctness over improvisation. Even when circumstances demanded adaptation, This is an outstanding analysis, Morrison commented after reading the report. You have identified key differences between our military cultures, but I notice you have shied away from the most important question: which method is more effective? You described differences without making a judgment on relative merit. Erica stared at her report, recognizing Morrison was correct. She had documented the disparities, but evaded the obvious conclusion proven by her own experience. The American training philosophy had produced an army that defeated the German army. Despite Germany's initial advantages in experience, equipment, and tactical theory, the American method is more effective, she finally stated. The admission, a painful, yet undeniable truth. Wehrmacht training produced soldiers excellent in parade ground, precision, and synchronized movement. But American training produced soldiers superior where it truly mattered: combat effectiveness, adaptability, and mission accomplishment. That is a difficult conclusion for a Wehrmacht officer. Morrison observed sympathetically. It is an impossible conclusion, Erica replied. But the evidence does not care for my preferences or national pride. I observed your training for 3 weeks. I saw American soldiers accomplish with initiative and adaptability what Wehrmacht soldiers could not, even with perfect obedience. The comparison was starkly unflattering to German military culture, but denying it does not change reality. Morrison looked at her thoughtfully. Ifar, Ulaine, Weber. Would you be interested in helping us develop training materials for post-war Germany's reconstruction? Your understanding of both Wehrmacht and American military cultures makes you invaluable in creating educational programs that can help Germans understand different approaches to military organization. The offer surprised her, but Erica recognized its wisdom. If Germany was to rebuild effectively, it needed to learn from societies that had succeeded where the German method had failed. Such learning would be more effective if it came from a German who could bridge the two cultures, rather than unfamiliar notions imposed by Americans. I will help, she decided, but I wish to be honest about what I am doing. Not to pretend American methods are perfect, but to explain why they are effective and how they can be adapted to post-war Germany's needs. That is precisely what we need, Morrison responded. Honest analysis that respects both cultures, yet recognizes military training should be judged by combat effectiveness, not parade ground appearance. Indeed, by November 1944, as Germany's military situation grew increasingly desperate, the prisoners of war increasingly recognized that the Wehrmacht's supposed superiority was propaganda rather than reality. For Erica, the training observations had crystallized into a painful understanding. German military culture had prioritized the wrong thing's appearance over effectiveness, obedience over initiative, rigid procedure over adaptive problem-solving. I have been asked to give a report, she told the gathered German posts during an evening discussion, on what we have learned from observing American military training. Colonel Morrison wants me to explain our observations to other prisoner of war groups, and eventually develop educational materials for post-war Germany. The announcement drew a mixed reaction. Some prisoners viewed it as collaboration with the enemy. Others saw it as a pragmatic preparation for post-war reconstruction. Monica spoke for the pragmatists. We lost the war in part because we believed our own propaganda about military superiority. If Erica's observations can help future Germans avoid similar mistakes, that is a valuable service to our nation. Over the next month, Erica presented to several prisoner of war groups, consistently emphasizing the same themes. American military training was effective because it aligned with American cultural values. German training failed because it prioritized the wrong attributes. Post-war German military reform needed to learn from Allied successes, not simply copy foreign methods. The key lesson, she explained in one lecture, is not that the American method is superior in an absolute sense. It is that effective military training must match the society it serves. Americans train initiative because their culture values individual Germans train obedience because our culture values hierarchical authority. In modern combat, initiative proved more valuable than obedience. So, you are saying German culture is inferior? Challenged a former panzer officer who still clung to the myth of the Wehrmacht. I am saying German military culture made choices that proved ineffective in modern warfare. Erica carefully replied, that is not the same as claiming overall cultural inferiority, but it does mean we need to honestly assess what truly works and what does not. Rather than perpetuate comforting myths of inherent superiority. As 1944 drew to a close and Allied victory became inevitable, American authorities began implementing comprehensive cultural re-education programs for prisoners of war destined to aid in Germany's post-war reconstruction. Erica found herself at the center of these efforts, developing training materials that compared military philosophies and explained why American methods were effective. "You've become quite influential," Captain Williams observed during one of her regular consultation sessions. "The posts respect your Wehrmacht credentials, but they also trust your analysis of American methods. That combination makes you invaluable in bridging significant cultural divides." "I am simply being honest about what I observed," Erica responded. "American training was effective because it cultivated soldiers who could think independently while maintaining unit cohesion. Wehrmacht training failed because it cultivated soldiers who could only act under direct command. These are factual observations, not valued judgments about national character. But they are valued judgments about military effectiveness," Williams pointed out, "and those judgments challenge the German myth of Wehrmacht superiority, which is precisely why they need to be spoken," Erica stated with conviction. "Germany lost the war, in part because we believed our own propaganda. If my observations can help future Germans recognize that military effectiveness fundamentally hinges on adaptability, not rigid obedience, then any criticism I receive from those who still cling to a failed ideology is worth it." In January 1945, as Germany's imminent final collapse accelerated, Erica was formally appointed to the post-war military education program. She would remain under American custody, but working as a civilian educator rather than a prisoner of war, instructing German civilians and military personnel on different approaches to military organization and training. "Your tenure may last for several years," Morrison explained. "Post-war German reconstruction will require extensive re-education on military culture and civil-military relations. Your unique perspective as a Wehrmacht officer who understands both German and American methods is invaluable to this endeavor." "I understand," Erica replied. "I am prepared to serve, even if some of my countrymen will consider me a traitor for acknowledging the superior effectiveness of American military training over Wehrmacht methods." "You are not acknowledging superiority," Morrison corrected. "You are acknowledging effectiveness. There is an important distinction. The American method works for American soldiers in the American context. The lesson for Germany is not to copy America, but to develop training methods that value initiative and problem-solving, while remaining authentically German." As the winter deepened and the war neared its end, Erica reflected on the profound transformation of her understanding. 3 months prior, she had stood at the barrack window, scoffing at American soldiers who did not move with Wehrmacht precision. Now, she understood that precision itself was not merely a characteristic, but often the very impediment to rigid adherence to procedure when dynamic situations demanded adaptation. Those casual farmers she had initially disdained were, in fact, highly competent professionals whose unceremonious efficiency bespoke quiet confidence, not sloppiness. Their training emphasized the traits that mattered in combat: initiative, problem-solving, adaptability, and mission orientation. Wehrmacht training had emphasized traits that looked impressive on the parade ground, but proved of little value in actual warfare: synchronized movement, unquestioning obedience, and rigid adherence to procedure. "Our soldiers were not superior," she wrote in her diary that night. "We were trained to value the wrong things. And it took being a prisoner and observing enemy soldiers train for me to understand that military excellence is measured not by parade ground precision, but by combat effectiveness. That is the lesson I will teach in the coming years to those Germans who need to understand that acknowledging past eras constitutes the foundational step towards a better future." March 1945. Germany collapsed, and the war in Europe concluded. But for Erica, it marked the beginning of a new mission. Her transition from prisoner to educator was formalized through a civilian employment contract with the U.S. Army military government, tasked with developing training programs for post-war German reconstruction. "Your first assignment, Colonel Morrison, now overseeing occupation planning," explained, "is to create educational materials explaining American military training philosophy to German officers who will be rebuilding the nation as defense forces under Allied supervision." Erica immediately understood the challenge. Former Wehrmacht officers would resist lessons from the victorious enemy, particularly when those lessons contradicted their cherished belief in German military excellence. She needed to present American methods, not as a superior alternative, but as an effective approach worthy of study and adaptation. "I wish to emphasize comparative analysis," she told Morrison during a planning meeting. "Not that the American method is better, but what Americans did differently, and why it worked for them. Let German officers draw their own conclusions based on evidence, rather than feel they are being lectured on their failures." This approach proved effective as she began conducting courses in occupied Munich. Former Wehrmacht officers were initially skeptical and defensive, but Erica's credentials are respected. Combat-tested communications officer in the German Army lent her a credibility that American instructors could not match. "I stood where you stand now," she told her first class of 40 German officers. "I observed American training and thought it appeared casual and inferior, but I forced myself to look closely and question my assumptions. What I learned challenged everything I believed about military excellence." She led them through the same observations she had made at Leavenworth: the American emphasis on initiative over obedience, decentralized decision-making over centralized control, and mission orientation over procedural rigidity. Each point was illustrated with concrete examples, comparing Wehrmacht and American approaches. "Consider a simple scenario," she proposed. "A squad encounters an unexpected enemy position in advance. Wehrmacht training says to report to command, wait for new orders. Execute the revised plan. American training says the squad leader assesses the situation, makes an immediate tactical decision, and adjusts without waiting for higher directives. In the fluid chaos of combat, which method is more effective?" "The Wehrmacht method maintains command control," interjected Major Hoffmann, a former panzer officer still loyal to traditional German military doctrine. "Without central coordination, units will operate independently and lose overall strategic coherence." "Does control matter if maintaining it means losing tactical opportunities?" Erica countered. "Americans defeated us in part because their soldiers adapted faster than our command system could issue new orders. We valued control over effectiveness, and we paid the price." The discussions, though heated, proved immensely productive. Former Wehrmacht officers grappled with uncomfortable truths about military effectiveness, slowly coming to recognize that defeat had not come from a lack of courage or inferior soldiers, but from a training philosophy that prioritized traits ill-suited for modern warfare. "You're making them question everything," Captain Williams observed, having been reassigned to occupation duties and occasionally auditing Erica's classes. "It's uncomfortable, but necessary." "It's exactly what I had to do," Erica replied. "Question everything I thought I knew about military excellence. If they are willing to undergo the same process, we can build something better than that catastrophic failure." Over the following months, Erica's reputation grew among both occupation authorities and German military personnel. She became known as the Wehrmacht officer capable of honestly assessing German failures without losing respect for German soldiers, and capable of explaining American successes without claiming inherent American superiority. "The key," she explained in one particularly successful class, "is recognizing that military training must align with national culture and combat reality. Americans train initiative because their culture values individual Germans train obedience because our culture values hierarchy. Neither is inherently right or wrong, but in modern warfare, adaptability proved more valuable than rigid procedure. That is the lesson we need to internalize." As 1945 concluded and the occupation deepened, Erica's work expanded beyond military training to broader questions of civil-military relations and democratic governance. But her core message remained consistent. Honest assessment of past failures was crucial for building a better future, and learning from former enemies required setting aside pride and acknowledging where they had done things more effectively. The winter of 1946 brought new challenges as Cold War tensions emerged, and American authorities recognized that German military reconstruction needed to counter Soviet influence, not just prevent German Erica found herself at the center of debates over how to build new German defense forces that both learned the lessons of Wehrmacht failure and avoided complete Americanization. "We need German officers who can think independently but operate within a democratic framework," explained General Matthews, the senior American officer overseeing military reconstruction planning. Your training programs need to prepare them for that balance initiative, problem-solving without the authoritarianism inherent in Wehrmacht culture. The task was delicate. Too much emphasis on American methods would alienate German officers, who would see it as cultural imperialism. Too little, and it risked repeating the failures of the Wehrmacht, creating the same hierarchical rigidity. Erica labored to find a middle ground that both respected German military tradition and incorporated the lessons of American effectiveness. I have been developing a concept I call mish-type tactics with democratic accountability, she explained in a presentation to senior American and German officials. It combines the Wehrmacht's traditional Auftragstactic mission-type orders, which gave subordinates freedom to achieve objectives, with the American emphasis on initiative and democratic civilian control. The concept resonated with both audiences. German officers appreciated the reference to the traditional Auftragstactic doctrine, which, before its corruption by Nazi-era authoritarianism, had indeed emphasized subordinate initiative. American officials appreciated the democratic accountability framework, which would prevent military independence from threatening civilian governance. This is an outstanding synthesis, remarked Brigadier General Weber. No relation to Erica, a former Wehrmacht officer now collaborating with occupation authorities. You've combined the best parts of both traditions to create something that might truly work for post-war Germany. But implementation proved challenging. Former Wehrmacht officers struggled to shed ingrained habits of rigid hierarchy. Younger hetmans, disillusioned by Nazi-era militarism, resisted any military training that seemed to bear a hint of authoritarianism. Erica found herself constantly adjusting her approach to suit different audiences, always emphasizing the same core message. Effective military training required a balance between discipline and initiative, between order and adaptability. Sometimes I feel I am teaching cats to swim, she confided to Monica, who had joined her educational team after proving equally effective at bridging German and American military cultures. The Wehrmacht veterans want rigid hierarchy. The young Germans reject anything that reminds them of Nazi militarism. Finding a middle ground that satisfies both is almost impossible. But it is necessary, Monica replied. Germany needs an army that can defend democracy without threatening it. That is the balance. You are trying to teach discipline without authoritarianism, initiative without chaos. By late 1946, Erica's training programs had educated over 500 former Wehrmacht officers in new approaches to military leadership tenets. Feedback indicated the programs were effective, with participants reporting valuable insights into why American military methods worked and how similar principles could be adapted to the German context. Your work has had an impact far beyond what we initially anticipated, Morrison told her during a review meeting. Several Allied nations are requesting your training materials for use in their respective occupation zones. You have become a leading voice in explaining how to reform German military culture without destroying valuable parts of its tradition. The recognition was gratifying, but also overwhelming. Erica had begun as a prisoner of war, scoffing at American training. Now she was an internationally recognized expert in military cultural reform. The transformation felt surreal, yet it mirrored the broader transformation Germany itself was undergoing, from defeated enemy to potential ally, from authoritarian militarism to democratic governance. I am simply being honest about what I observed, she responded to Morrison's praise. American training was effective because it aligned with American values and combat reality. German training failed because it prioritized appearance over effectiveness. The lesson is not complicated. When training matches cultural values and tactical requirements, armies succeed. Germany's challenge is to develop training that serves democratic values while maintaining military effectiveness. As 1946 concluded, Erica was formally appointed senior advisor to the Military Training Division of the Allied High Commission, a position that would shape German military reconstruction for years to come. The former Wehrmacht officer, who had once scoffed at American soldiers, had become an architect of the new German military culture, a culture based in part on lessons learned from those very American soldiers she had once disdained. Summer 1955. A decade after the war's end, Erica stood at a newly constructed Bundeswehr training facility near Munich, watching the first generation of post-war German soldiers conduct exercises that fused German military tradition with lessons learned from American effectiveness. The young soldiers moved with purpose and discipline, but their training emphasized initiative and problem-solving, not rigid obedience. Impressive, commented Jenry Taylor, who had traveled from U.S. Army headquarters to observe the training Erica had helped design. They look professional and disciplined, but you could see the difference from the old Wehrmacht style. These soldiers are trained to think, not just obey. That was always the goal, Erica replied, watching a squad leader make an independent tactical decision in a training scenario. To create an army that combined German tradition with the American lessons of adaptability and initiative, it has taken 10 years. But I think we have finally achieved that balance. The Bundeswehr training program represented everything Erica had learned since that morning in 1944, when she had stood at the barrack window, mocking American soldiers. The new German army emphasized democratic values, civilian control, and individual initiative, while maintaining the discipline and professional standards valued in German military tradition. "Do you have any regrets?" Monica asked, now a senior training administrator herself, who had accompanied Erica to observe the graduation. 10 years spent teaching Germans to adopt methods you once scorned. "Ne regret," Erica stated firmly. "I regret the years I wasted believing the Wehrmacht's propaganda about our superiority, but I do not regret the decade I spent helping Germany learn from its mistakes." At the graduation ceremony that afternoon, both German and Allied officials spoke, all emphasizing the same themes: democratic values, military professionalism, and the importance of learning from past failures. When Erica was called to the stage to receive commendation for her contributions to military reconstruction, she was deeply moved by the immense progress Germany had made. 10 years ago, she told the assembled soldiers and officials, "I was a Wehrmacht officer, convinced that German military training was superior to anything our enemies could produce. I mocked American soldiers because they lacked parade ground precision, because they questioned orders, because they valued initiative over obedience." She paused, looking out at the young German soldiers who had grown up in a Germany so different from the one she had served. It took being a prisoner of war and observing American training with an open mind for me to understand that my entire understanding of military excellence had been flawed. Wehrmacht training produced soldiers who looked impressive on the parade ground, but who faltered when combat demanded adaptation. American training produced soldiers who looked casual, but who proved devastatingly effective when situations demanded independent problem-solving. The lesson I learned, and the lesson I have spent a decade teaching, is that effective military training must serve the actual demands of combat, not our aesthetic preferences for synchronized movement and unquestioning obedience. Modern warfare rewards initiative, adaptability, and decentralized decision. The Bundeswehr you are joining is built on these very principles, combining the best parts of German military tradition with lessons learned from studying why our enemies succeeded where we failed. As the ceremony concluded and the young soldiers dispersed to their first assignments, Erica reflected on the incredible journey from prisoner of war to architect of Germany's military reconstruction. The transformation had required setting aside pride, acknowledging painful truths, and recognizing that learning from former enemies was an act of patriotic service, not betrayal. "Any final thoughts?" Colonel Morrison asked, who had flown in from Washington for the ceremony. Over the years, he had become Erica's friend, a man who understood the difficulty and importance of the work she had undertaken. "Only gratitude," Erica replied. "Gratitude for seeing Bundeswehr soldiers acting with professional discipline, respecting German tradition yet embracing democratic values. Gratitude that I was captured by men generous enough to choose, to teach, not merely punish. Gratitude that I was forced to observe training that challenged my assumptions. And gratitude that I had the opportunity to help build something better than that catastrophic failure." As night fell and the ceremony concluded, Erica walked through the training facility one last time, a place that represented a decade of work and transformation. The young German soldiers she passed looked confident and capable, their training methods revolutionary in Wehrmacht culture, yet normalized in service to a democratic German military. "Our soldiers were never superior," she murmured to herself, recalling her arrogant declaration on that first day. "We just believed our own propaganda and paid a terrible price for that." True superiority came from those Americans, confident enough in their methods to allow enemy prisoners to observe closely, convinced that honest observation would reveal their effectiveness. She had learned that the greatest victory was not military conquest, but the transformation of understanding that came from setting aside prejudice long enough to recognize that former enemies might also have valuable lessons to impart. and that the strongest armies were those that valued effectiveness over appearance, substance over form, and had the courage to admit when cherished beliefs had been proven wrong. As she drove away from the training facility and towards her home in Munich, Erica felt immense pride in what had been achieved for German military reconstruction. Not because it replicated American methods, but because it had learned from American successes to forge something authentically German and truly democratic, an army that could defend without threatening, that valued initiative without abandoning discipline, and that recognized true excellence came from adaptability, not rigid adherence to procedure. The American soldiers she had once scorned had taught her the most valuable lesson of all, that strength comes not from never making mistakes, but from having the courage to recognize them and learn from those who succeeded where you failed.